They range from champion footballers, past and present, to men and women of all ages from all walks of life. The common thread is their love of football, the bric-a-brac, the mementos, the trivia and the rarities. You will find them scouring junk shops, at sporting fairs and in the rooms of Australia's most prestigious auction houses. In this show we meet that burgeoning breed who are prepared to spend their hard-earned cash on a piece of memorabilia from years past. It might be a medallion, a footy jumper that has seen better days, or a scrap of paper with the name of a great champion inscribed forever. It may be displayed elegantly in pride of place, or quietly tucked away and put on display on special occasions. They're a rare group with a deep knowledge of football and its personalities. They are the collectors.
In their fields, they are two of the greats. Over 15 seasons, Doug Wade was one of the superstars of the game. The second man to kick 1,000 VFL goals, a premiership hero at Geelong and at North Melbourne. Today, he can reflect on a football career that's had few equals. And when it comes to memorabilia, this man is in a field of his own. When the AFL decided to begin a collection of football cards, it turned to Rhett Milne. The result has been staggering. Two men who know football inside out. Two men who are featured in this edition of The Collectors. At AFL headquarters at Colonial Stadium, Rhett Milne has helped the league assemble the finest collection of football cards in the land. Representing more than a century of the game, they're carefully catalogued and housed and are worth a small fortune.
My name is Rhett Milne and I am a valuer. I value on radio stations in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne and various other places. And I was asked by the AFL if I could help put together a collection of the old footy cards. And about 8 years ago or so, Ian Collins rang me, and I'd have to say that this collection, which we're going to have a look at today, which is all here in all of these books, is largely responsible. Ian is largely responsible for what's happened because he has a passion about football like no other administrator I ever dealt with in my life. So we're going to take a look at some of the cards that we've got in the albums here, and I'll give you a few tips as well as to how you might start collecting cards too. The reason we've got cigarette cards is back in the real early days, they used to have cigarette packets that were very soft and they were just little 10 packets, and somebody decided they'd better put a little piece of cardboard down the back to sort of stiffen the pack. Now, a very bright spark decided, well, hey, if we're putting cardboard in, why not put something on them? And this is the very, very first set of footy cards that ever came out. They came out from a company called Snyder and Abrahams with their cigarette, which was called Standard Cigarettes, and this is very unusual. Players in action on the football field from 1904. Now, this card we're looking at right down in the bottom corner here is the only known copy. It was a set of 16 and everybody knew about that, but this one here had never been seen before. It was found in Echuca in Victoria about 15 years or so ago, and that's an extremely rare card. In fact, these cards in general sell for about $30 to $50 in good condition, maybe $100 in excellent condition, meaning mint condition, sharp corners and so forth. That card, name your own price, because as far as we know, it's the only one in the world. This is the very, very first set. It's the only set that ever came out at that time that showed players in action. By the 1920s, the cult of the personality had sort of started. Already there were pictures of football players themselves, and people used to have their heroes and so forth. Here's a good example. This little fellow on the top corner here is from an extremely rare set put out by a company called McIntyre Brothers. Now, they were a little sweet company in Melbourne that didn't last very many years and they had very limited distribution. So these cards are extremely hard to find. In fact, as you can see, the AFL still needs 4, so you know how rare the set is if they don't even have a complete set. But this picture here is Roy Cazaly. Now, of course, the anthem, the football anthem about Up There Cazaly is about that very man there. And of course, it's still in use as the Sydney Swans theme song. There's Roy Cazaly. That's his very first picture right there. This set here, so rare that you can almost name your price for them, but they'd start at about $400 a card. Now, one of the nice parts about collecting is so far we've shown all the rare ones. But by the time the 30s came along, a lot of these cards have become actually quite easy to find, and they don't sell for a big price even today. Now, if anybody's interested in sort of starting to collect some of these cards, I reckon a great idea is to ask your uncles and your grandpa and anybody you know, like family reunions is a great place to start. Just ask anybody, maybe the old people down the street, if you've got any of the old footy cards. Now, as often as not, these are the sort of cards that you'll end up with. These were put out by Alan Sweets. There's 144 in the set. They sell for no more than sort of $3 or $4 or $5, and there are some from the 1930s that sell even for just a couple of dollars. Now, of all of the cards, these from the 1930s are probably the cheapest cards. It's funny because later on we'll show you some cards from the 40s and 50s and 60s that are much more expensive, but these are a good way to start. By the time the 50s came along, cards were being put out by petrol companies, sweet companies, porridge companies, all sorts of people were putting out cards. Generally speaking, some of them are very expensive. The smaller the company, the more expensive the cards. But some of them, like this set that was put out by Atlantic Petrol, a company that's long gone, it's 128 in the set, not particularly valuable today. But you can see that they put them out in team order. Now, by this stage, a lot of people were collecting just their team, nothing else, just their own team, which is a great idea. Also, a little tip, the first card and the last card in the set are always the most valuable, because what kids used to do is they'd have the set and they'd put a rubber band around it, take it to school and so forth, and of course the first and last were always the ones that got damaged. So there's the first card in this set, Eric Gives and Kilda. That is the most valuable card. It's worth about 3 times as much as the others. Now, of all of the card sets, you'd think that from seeing they came out in the start of 1904, that maybe the earliest cards would be the most desirable. In fact, the holy grail in footy card collecting is this set that came out in 1963, put out by a company called Scanlon Sweets. It was their very first set, Sydney-based company, and a very bizarre set. There's lots of mistakes on the cards. There's only 18 in the set, and certainly the rarest cards. Now, the cards themselves turn up a bit, but they were printed on very poor quality paper, and what happened? Kids took them to school and played flicks against the wall and so forth, and when you find them, almost always they're in very poor condition. This set that the AFL has is perfect. Now, price, it's the hardest thing to price because to find a mint set is almost impossible. There are only 1 or 2 known, and my feeling is that this set would go for somewhere about $10,000, $15,000 if you could find it. Only 18 cards, unbelievable. But from 1963, perhaps the rarest set, or the most not the rarest, but the most desirable set of cards ever. Now, included amongst these cards are such people as Bob Skilton, who won 3 Brownlow medals. Now, there are people who collect Brownlow medal winners. As I said before, there are people who collect players from only their team, their favourite team. There are others who collect just Brownlow medal winners, and as a result in this set there are a couple of Brownlow medalists, and Bob is one of them, and therefore his card is more desirable than some of the other cards in the set. Now, those 1963 cards I was talking about from Scanlon's, you bought those in a packet. It cost 3p, which is the equivalent today of about 3 or 4 cents. That's for a packet. Now, of course, what most kids did was to pull the cards out, eat the gum that was in there, and throw away the wrapper. Now, today, because so many of the wrappers were thrown away, even the wrappers from those cards are worth about a couple of hundred, maybe $300. So if you're lucky enough to find an original packet complete, then you've really got some money. By the time we got to the 90s, or even into the 80s, the cards were really beautifully made, but out of a sort of almost indestructible sort of material. As a result, there is no failure rate with these cards, not like the earlier cards, which used to get bent and creased and torn and so forth. These never will, never can, because they're made out of such good material. As a result, these cards are never really going to have a great value. Even if we live to be 100, they're not going to have any kind of a great value. However, they did put in some of these, very occasionally in some of the packets of the newer cards, some specials. Some of them had sort of a gold rim around the edge, or they had signed by a player and so forth. Some of those can be very valuable. Unfortunately, you've got to buy an awful lot of these to get those. And these days, you only get the cards. You don't get any gum, you don't get anything special, and you just get the cards in the pack, and of course they're much more expensive. But that's progress. Now today we've looked at maybe sort of 6 or 8, maybe 10 sets of some of the most important cigarette and trade cards put out that are owned by the AFL. In total there are about 54 or 55 albums here, so we've just really scratched the surface. Now I reckon anybody out there who's a bit interested in collecting, the best way to go about it is to start by asking uncles and aunts and cousins and so forth, and you might be able to start a pretty good collection of material from, say, the 70s back through to about the 1920s that doesn't necessarily cost a fortune. Maybe consider collecting just your own club. That's one good suggestion. Now, the AFL has invested some tens of thousands of dollars here, as you can imagine. The cards today, as compared to what they paid for them, just increased dramatically in price. Now, if you ask my opinion, I would reckon that the value of footy cards in general is about 25% going up on a tidal wave. We haven't seen a thing yet, so now's the time to start collecting if you plan to.
Doug Wade was a country boy with a big reputation when he arrived at Geelong back in 1961. These days, he's returned to his roots. The former Cat Premiership star is heavily involved with the Geelong Football Club again and has carefully cultivated the memorabilia of a marvellous football career.
I'm here with Doug Wade, who was one of the great players from football's golden era of the 1960s and 70s. Perhaps I should have said the great player, Doug.
And you're a Geelong supporter.
I am.
Yeah,
So
that's fantastic.
I think we probably should start with the Geelong's last premiership winning jumper.
Well, yeah, number 23, there it is. It's a lot smaller than, I think they're a lot smaller than what they make them now. I know I couldn't get into it.
You must have watched it in hot water, Doug.
Well, in those days you didn't have anywhere to keep them. You know, you just threw them in the bottom of a case and hope one day you can bring them out every now and then.
And of course, in those days, you probably only got one jumper to play the whole season.
Just about the whole season.
Yeah. So that's why for collectors, if you get jumpers from the older eras of football, well, not that much older, but this era, they're much more valuable than modern day jumpers because often players have a new jumper every match these days.
Yeah, this was the old Jason Knitting Mills it was made.
Yeah, local Geelong wool, I would think.
Yes, and wool, yeah, made out of wool. Very, very hard on the skin. Nowadays, it's of course it's a nylon sort of a jumper now.
And of course, for Geelong fans, everybody knows that number 23 means Doug Wade.
Yeah.
But when you went to North Melbourne, you changed to a different number.
Number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah. David Dench had number 23 up there. So
you couldn't shift it off him.
He wasn't going to take it away. No.
Of course, in the 60s, plastics was king, but as we can see, it didn't last with the Victorian jumpers.
No.
But this is your first state jumper, and it's quite a famous story behind that.
Number 16 I wore. Although you could hardly say it was number 16, but that was my first game in 1962. I played for Victoria, and I kicked 10 goals that day in it. So it's got great memories. Johnny Burt, who was over, I think, kicked 6. Bobby Skilton kicked 4. Teddy Whitten kicked 4. So we absolutely thrashed. I think it was South Australia that day. Yeah.
The interesting thing about that era is it was a very even competition. I think in a 10, 11-year period, eight different teams won premierships. And of course, teams that had never won premierships before, like St Kilda, Hawthorn and North Melbourne, won premierships at that time
so,
too.
yeah, very exciting.
Very exciting. A lot of players who are still big names, I guess, Doug.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
You went to North Melbourne
I
in
did.
1974 under the 10-year rule.
Yeah. 73, actually.
73.
Yeah, it was my first year. We just missed out on the finals in 73, and then in 74 we played Richmond in the grand final, and then of course the next year we played Hawthorn and won, and that's the jumper.
This is your grand final jumper.
That's the grand final jumper. Yeah.
Now, what's the story about you playing behind and not in front? There's all sorts of urban myths about you not going for marks in that match.
Well, what actually happened, I was very, very lucky. I didn't play in the preliminary final because I was out injured. And luckily for me and unluckily for Richard McKelchek, he broke down. And so the following week, it was the grand final and I was brought back in. And then I can still remember that Ron Barassi came out and had a game of chess with me on the Friday night, which was strange because I couldn't play, he could. But he just wanted to talk to me. And he suggested that night that he didn't want me to fly for a mark. And he was going to try and fool the opposition so that they think I was going to.
And of course, that was your trademark, no
yes,
pun intended.
Although I actually wasn't going that well at that time in my career. So I just stayed down on the ground and it was remarkable. The ball just came over. Pardon me. And I think I kicked 4 goals, could have got another 3. Missed one. One was thrown to me and I kicked a goal. And Arnold Vitus didn't handball one to me when he should have, and he kicked the goal. So there was 7, but I kicked 4 goals in that jumper, and it was great memories. So I had a fantastic time at North Melbourne.
Yeah, North Melbourne's a very innovative team, and you've got an interesting jumper here, which I think is probably the first commercially sponsored football jumper.
Yeah, that was by Courage. Courage was an English company, beer brewing company, came out and they decided to sponsor North Melbourne, so I've kept it just purely for that sake.
Yeah, it's these sorts of little differences in jumpers that collectors should always look for, because often it's how you can date them and they add or subtract value according to the nature of the jumper. Well, the grand final wasn't your last match, as it turned out. You made a comeback.
I made a comeback in 1996. That was a centenary year, and of course we played a curtain raiser to the Essendon Geelong game on a Wednesday night, I believe it was, and I wore again the number 23, and it's the old-fashioned jumper with the long sleeve. I've also got the
cap on the knickerbockers.
Yes, I have, in the knickerbockers. Yeah. Now.
And again, there's a story about number 23 in that match. There are a few smokies in that.
Well, of course, everybody wore their number, and playing in my side was Brereton, who, of course, are very famous from number 23 in Hawthorn, and Kenny Fraser, 23 for...
So
for
23 would have kicked a few goals in that
well,
match.
well, I don't think we did, no. I don't think we did.
But the blue side won.
The blue side won, we won, yeah, against, I think it was, well, who did we play? The red, was it? I think
Red side.
Yeah, the red side, yeah, we won, yeah.
Well, Doug, this is a fantastic collection of jumpers, and as a Geelong fan, I guess the most valuable one to me would probably be your 63 Premiership jumper. And of course, the 75 North Melbourne jumper is fantastically important too, because
Well,
it was
that's
North's
the first ever
flag.
Yeah, first ever flag, yeah.
So those two jumpers, plus your Victorian jumper, which I think at the time was a record 10 goals for Victoria.
I think it was,
when
yeah.
it happened.
Yeah.
Extremely valuable items. I mean, these days I wouldn't be surprised if they sold for in the tens of thousands of dollars, depending on under what circumstances they were sold. Certainly in Christie's auctions, you'd be expecting in excess of $10,000, I would think. Right. So look after them.
Oh,
I hear you're going to get them framed.
Well, in those days, of course, there was nothing to frame. There was nothing around how you could frame them. Now there's been so many advances in how you frame them and things. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Well, it's a very rare and unusual collection because you were one of the first group of players that had a major career in two clubs. It was unusual for players to swap, and particularly unusual for players to have the success that you did at both ends of your career. So they're very important items in the history of football.
They're great to keep, they really are.
More of the Doug Wade collection after the break. You're watching The Collectors on Fox Footy.
Of course, Doug Wade is famous for being one of only 5 players to have kicked over 1,000 goals in league football. I think you were the second player to achieve that landmark.
Yes, Gordon Nuts Coventry was first, way back in the early days, and then myself in 74.
Followed by the modern day players.
Followed by all the modern day players. Yeah.
Much easier to kick goals these days.
Oh, yeah, much easier.
Doug, the football's here. The good thing about your era, of course, was that the trophies were fantastic.
Yeah.
When the big money came into football, they stopped making really nice trophies. But you've got some beauties here. Can you tell us about this ball?
Well, this one here was the game against South Melbourne at the old Lakeside Oval. It was a shocking day, very wet, and I remember waking up thinking, gee, I just don't like these sort of games. Anyway, as it turned out, the ball just fell into my lap. A young player called Colin Eales played a sensational game that day and actually gave me 5 or 6 goals, and I finished up kicking 13 goals. So the South Melbourne Football Club actually mounted that for me, that one.
And that broke a long-standing record of, I think, 11 goals was the previous highest.
Yeah, that's right, for Geelong, yeah.
Fantastic. And the next ball was quite important.
Well, the next ball was in 1969, was the first time I actually kicked 100 goals. And the Geelong Football Club had that mounted for me there. And that was in, I kicked it down here at Cardinia Park. Jeff Crouch was the umpire that day, and I think I had to kick 4 in the last quarter, and I finished up kicking that, and then they took me off because the crowd just was going to invade the ground. Yeah, so that's very, very important football for me, that one.
And of course, this one is the crowning achievement.
This one?
You've only just received that. You might tell us that story.
Well, it was mounted and given to me by the Hawthorn Football Club, because they were at that stage, it was kicked on the Carlton ground, which is now up to Sable, but Hawthorn played there. And that's my 1000th goal in 1974. And when it was mounted and handed to me, a bloke called Tony Healy, who used to be in the Go Show, a Go Show dancer, and now he's in public relations, and he does public relations for Louder and a whole lot of other people. He said, I'm going to have that. And he took it away, and I thought he was joking. And I've only just got it back about a year ago. But he actually cleaned it and mounted it for me. And not mounted, but actually cleaned it all up and polished it all up for me. So that's nice.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, of course, it was the first time in 40 or 50 years that a player had achieved 1,000 goals. Well, all of these trophies, coming from the era that they came from and representing the feats that they represent, Doug, are extremely interesting and priceless, really. It's very hard to put individual values on something, for instance, like the 1,000-goal football and the 100-goal in a season football. So they're fantastic things. I would think, again, as with the jumpers we spoke about, they're probably in excess of tens of thousands of dollars, particularly for the 1,000-goal and the 100-goal.
This was my best and fairest, the Jim Knight Memorial Trophy in 1969, presented to me. It's actually an ice bucket.
And it's an apple.
And, yeah, it looks like an apple, doesn't it?
Must have been prophetic, because as a Geelong fan, I know that you had a run-in with an apple about a year after this.
I did. Would you believe I've still got it? Would you believe that?
You better tell the story for the viewers.
Well, you wouldn't believe it. I've still got it, but it was an apple similar to... Actually, I couldn't get a Granny Smith. It was a green apple. I can certainly remember that. I was lining up for goal. I'd taken a mark and I was out on the half-forward flank, about 15 metres from the fence, in from the fence. And when I dropped the ball, from the time the ball, before it hit my foot, or before my foot came through, somebody threw an apple. And it wasn't a full apple, so they'd eaten a bit out of it, obviously. I'm sure they were throwing it at me, but it actually hit the football and skewed it round on its side. And so when I came through, I kicked it on the... Well, I actually kicked it and rolled off. Johnny Rantell was standing on my mark. He was my full-back for South Melbourne in those. They took it away and actually won the game. They kicked the goal and they won the game. I don't know what it was by, but they just won the game and got into the finals.
And it cost Geelong a place in the finals.
It did.
I remember that match.
It was either South or ourselves into the finals.
Yeah, and they had to win that match to get in.
They absolutely had to win, yeah.
Well, whoever's got the real apple, it's worth a lot of money.
Well, yeah. We get to the core of it, couldn't we?
Good too.
Yeah.
Well, Doug, you have a great collection of photographs here, so I just picked out a couple of the more interesting team photographs, and we're starting with your Geelong Premiership team of
1963.
63. There's an interesting ring in this photograph you might like to talk about.
Well, Johnny Sharrock is actually there. It's really not John Sharrock, it's his head. It's a cutout of his head on the shoulders of Darryl Barker, seconds player. John got the wrong date, or said he was given the wrong date and didn't show up. Very similar to Sam Kekovich in the North Melbourne shot. But so that's Darryl Barker's body and Johnny Sharrock's head there. I'm just down here somewhere, I think. Yeah, Buffer there, Bob Davis, Freddie Wooler, our captains there.
Well, as you mentioned, absences from grand final photos seem to run in the family of Wade premierships.
Yeah.
This is the North Melbourne premiership of 75.
That's right.
Very famous absence from that one.
Yeah, Sam Kekovich. I can tell you where he was, but I'm not going to.
Perhaps you better not. It's probably not the right time of night.
No, it's not. But yes, no, he didn't quite make it. Well, for the photograph anyway. So, but there's some fantastic players there. When you look at Malcolm Blight and Barry Cable, Shimmer, David Dench, Barry Davis, our captain, Johnny Rantell.
It was quite a controversy when North recruited all those players under the 10-year rule, and there was a bit of shenanigans went along. You were telling me about.
Well, it was going to be a vote at the table of the 12 board of directors, or the directors of each club. They weren't presidents in those days. They were just appointed a director. Albert Mantello was North Melbourne's director. They were definitely going to vote that in fact they wanted the 10-year rule in, but Albert could sense around the table that they were going to vote it in, so he voted against it. To throw a bit of a scent, a bit of a sting, yeah, a bit of a smokescreen. He voted against it, and in the meantime, he rang Ron Joseph, said it's on, and he contacted all of us, and we finished up there.
Yeah, and of course it really revolutionised the game and probably helped North win their first premiership.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. Yeah, there was John Rantell, Barry Davis, and myself went across on that 10-year rule.
Well, again, even with Sam's absence, the North Melbourne premiership photo, particularly if you can get it signed by the players, is extremely valuable. Hard to put an actual price on it. The other interesting one you've got here is from the same premiership, which has all the kangaroo collectible bubblegum cards of that era. Sam's in this one, I noticed.
Yes, and just over near you, just there, just right there, yeah. This was given to me by my daughter, who is a mad North Melbourne supporter, and she gave it to me for Christmas. A few years ago now, but it's one of my prized collections.
And the famous quote by Alan Killigrew, I think, the team that wins North Melbourne's first VFL premiership gains football immortality.
Yeah.
Well, I think it has, Doug. And
well, that's true, you know, like no matter where we go, we know, when we meet again, we know we've been a member of that first ever side.
And of course this is extremely interesting and would be quite valuable with the collector cards, even though they're not a full set of all that year, they're the full set of the North Melbourne premiership players.
Yes, Gary Farrant wasn't around when colour was in, so he's in black and white.
Well, he was brought back from the bush, I think.
He did, yeah. Brass brought him back for a Pacific reason, actually, to play on that half-back flank.
Yeah. Okay, and then the other things I thought we'd look at are some of the trophies that really span your whole career. Some interesting little medallions here, your 200 player club membership medallion, and also your Geelong Football Club
life membership. Yeah. The medallion, I don't know what number.
One every year, I think.
I was it's got a number on the back, you might be able to see that.
64.
Oh, yeah, I was number 64.
The 64th player to play 200
play
games.
200 games. I think there's a lot more now because there's a season stretches out and players can play up to 30 games. Interstate matches are counted.
Because some years when you played, it was only 18-game seasons.
Yeah, and no such thing as pre-season like they do now, so that you can play half a dozen games in pre-season now.
And of course your Hall of Fame plaque, you were one of the inaugural members of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, the first one in the first 100, yeah. I really treasure that. That's
well, I mean, this is one of those items that's really priceless to both the recipient and to football history.
Yes, it is.
Well, Doug, the memorabilia from your career didn't stop when you stopped playing. This is interesting. This is obviously an ad for some sort of hairdressing salon, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, this was brought out. This is an AFL product. It was brought out some time ago. The 4 greatest ever goal kickers who kicked over 1,000 goals, the 4 highest, including Coventry, Dunstall, Lockett and myself. And then I've gone a little bit further with it. I've got a collection now, this is one of only 12 that I've introduced, of actual action shots around it as well, and a lot of different things on it. You can see from, it's very interesting to go through the records and see how the players dressed in the Coventry days, isn't it? Gordon Coventry there.
Well, this type of very limited edition memorabilia where it's signed and endorsed by the players involved is something that is going to be of value and much better than mass-produced examples where there's thousands of copies. It's something that people can probably acquire for an accessible price and over time will definitely appreciate.
Yes, yes. There's going to be a plaque put on there to say that that is the case in 1 and 12. This has only just been put together for today. Yeah.
And it looks like full forwards all favoured the same sort of hairstyle
We do.
in later life.
We do, actually. Actually, no, I won't tell you that, but no, we do. Tony likes his comb forward a little bit more than us. Well, he had a bit of hair to comb forward, actually.
As an avid Geelong supporter, Doug, it's been a great pleasure for me to come and share this memorabilia with our audience, even just the fraction that we've been able to look at. And it's always interesting to be able to go through things that players have saved and bring back a lot of memories for someone like me who supported the clubs that you played for. But even for the people that are just generally interested, it's a fascinating experience. So thanks for being with us.
It's been a pleasure.
You don't have to be a 1,000-goal forward or have an encyclopedic knowledge of football history to be part of this rapidly growing group. Just a love of the game and an eye for a bargain, and you too can be a collector.